The lights in the Grand Assembly Hall flickered as the final votes were counted. Ambassador Day One stood at the human platform, his hands gripping the metal railing so hard his knuckles turned white. Around him, hundreds of alien representatives watched the massive holographic display that floated in the center of the chamber. Numbers climbed higher and higher. 612 votes in favor. The decision was final. Earth and all human colonies would be exiled from galactic civilization. Day One had seen this coming for months. The whispers had started small, in dark corners of diplomatic meetings. Humans were too aggressive, they said. Too unpredictable. They expanded too fast, colonized worlds without proper permission. And worst of all, they refused to stop developing artificial intelligence. The Council had rules, ancient rules, that kept the galaxy stable for thousands of years. Humanity had been part of this community for only 80 years, and already they were breaking every protocol. The lead prosecutor, a tall creature named Velthor from the Ascendancy, rose from his seat. His skin shimmered like oil on water, and his voice echoed through translation devices worn by every delegate. "The evidence is clear," Velthar announced. "Humanity has established 47 colonies in restricted zones. They have created thinking machines that violate the artificial mind prohibition. They spread their culture without regard for contamination protocols. We cannot allow this chaos to continue." Day One wanted to laugh. Chaos. They called human innovation chaos. They called human art and music contamination. They feared human technology because it advanced faster than theirs. The real reason for this exile was simple. Humanity made them uncomfortable. Humans asked too many questions. Humans refused to accept that some technologies were forbidden, just because ancient species said so. Captain Hijin watched from orbit aboard the Earth Defense Fleet flagship. She stood on the bridge, arms crossed, as communications officers monitored the Council broadcast. When the vote total appeared on screen, she closed her eyes for a moment. Around her, the bridge crew fell silent. They had all known this might happen, but seeing it made real felt different. "Captain, what are our orders?" Her second officer asked quietly. Hijin opened her eyes. "We wait. The ambassador will signal us when it's time." Down on Centrum Prime, Day One requested permission to make a final statement. The Council speaker, an ancient being that looked like floating crystal formations, granted him 2 minutes. Day One stepped forward, and his image was projected large across every screen in the chamber. "You fear us because we're different," he began, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. "You fear us because we don't accept your limitations. For 5,000 years, you've maintained the same technology, the same borders, the same ways of thinking. Then humanity arrived, and in just 80 years we've matched what took you millennia. That's not our fault. That's your failure." Angry sounds filled the chamber. Several delegates activated their translation devices to shout protests. But Day One continued. "You call our AI development dangerous, but you can't explain why, except to say it's always been forbidden. You call our expansion aggressive, but we've settled worlds you've deemed worthless. You call our culture contaminating, but your own people line up to experience human entertainment. You don't exile us because we're dangerous. You exile us because we make you question your own stagnation." The speaker cut off his microphone. "The human ambassador will respect this council's decision. As of this moment, all trade agreements with Earth are terminated. All diplomatic embassies will be closed and staff returned to human space. Jump gate access to human systems is revoked. A quarantine zone of 30 light-years will be established around all human-controlled territory. Any human vessel crossing this boundary will be destroyed. This exile will remain in effect until humanity demonstrates it can follow galactic law." Day One smiled coldly. "We understand perfectly. You've made your choice. Now, you'll live with the consequences." Security drones escorted him from the platform. As he walked through the grand halls of Centrum Prime for the last time, he passed representatives from species that had once called themselves Earth's friends. Some looked away in shame. Others watched with satisfaction. A few looked nervous, as if they already regretted what they'd done, in his private quarters. Day-Wan activated his encrypted communicator. The signal bounced through 6 relay stations before reaching Earth. Dr. Taeyong's face appeared on the screen. The scientist looked tired but alert. "The vote passed," Day-Wan said simply. Taeyong nodded. "I've been monitoring the broadcast. How much time do we have?" "They're giving us 30 days to withdraw all personnel from Council space. After that, the quarantine begins." 30 days, Taeyong repeated. He looked off-screen at something, typing commands on a keyboard Day-One couldn't see. "It's enough. We'll begin protocol exodus immediately." "You sure about this?" Day-One asked. "Once we start, there's no going back." Taeyong smiled, and there was something fierce in that expression. "They think they're punishing us. They think isolation will force us to beg for readmission on their terms. They have no idea what we've been preparing. Let them seal us away. When we emerge, they won't recognize what humanity has become." The transmission ended. Day-One packed his belongings, which took less than 5 minutes. 80 years of diplomatic service, and it all fit in a single bag. He took one last look around the quarters that had been his home for the past decade, then walked out without looking back. On the flagship, Heejin received the coded message from Day-One. Just 2 words: initiate exodus. She turned to her communications officer. "Send the signal to all human ships and colonies. Prepare for immediate withdrawal. Tell them to follow the contingency plans exactly." Across Council space, human diplomats, merchants, researchers, and tourists began their evacuation. They moved quickly and efficiently, as if they'd practiced this many times, because they had. Humanity had seen this coming long before the Council made it official. As the last human transport left Centrum Prime, Elthar stood at an observation window, watching it disappear into jump space. He felt satisfaction. The human problem was solved. The galaxy could return to peace and order. He had no idea that he'd just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 6 months passed since the Exile began, and the galaxy noticed something wrong. The silence from human space was absolute. No radio signals. No commercial broadcasts. No distress calls or navigation beacons. Nothing. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from existence. Merchant. Captain Phelanix piloted his cargo ship toward the quarantine boundary. He'd made this run 100 times before the Exile, trading rare metals with human colonies. Those humans paid well and asked few questions. Now he approached the zone's edge, his sensors reaching into human territory, searching for any sign of activity. The screen showed nothing. Empty space. Dead colonies. Silent stations. "This doesn't make sense," his navigator said, adjusting the scanning frequencies. There were millions of humans in this sector alone. Where did they go? Phalanix didn't answer. He was remembering something a human trader named Sunjo had told him once, over drinks at a station bar. "If you ever hear we've gone quiet," Sungho had said with a strange smile, "don't assume it means we're gone. It means we're working." At the Galactic Trade Commission headquarters, problems were mounting. Junior analyst Sung Min sat at his workstation reviewing reports that made less sense each day. He was human, one of the few allowed to remain in council space due to his low-level position. Nobody suspected that he'd been placed here deliberately years ago. Waiting for exactly this moment, the reports painted a clear picture. Trade routes that had relied on human goods were failing. Medical supplies weren't moving properly. Entertainment networks had massive gaps in their content libraries. Manufacturing facilities that had incorporated human techniques couldn't maintain their efficiency. The galaxy had exiled humanity, but humanity had become part of the economic foundation without. Anyone noticing Sung-Min made small changes to shipping schedules. He delayed critical reports. He misfiled important documents. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would draw attention. But each small sabotage added to the growing chaos. He was one of 30 sleeper agents scattered across council institutions, all doing the same quiet work. In the halls of the Grand Assembly, council members began asking uncomfortable questions. Medical Representative Chevelle stood before the Health Committee, holding a data pad with shaking hands. "We have a crisis," she announced. "The plague of Veltar has returned in the outer colonies. Our previous treatment protocol relied on a pharmaceutical synthesis technique that we learned from human researchers. We can observe the process, but we cannot replicate it. The equipment doesn't work the same way when we try. Then adapt, someone suggested. Develop your own method. Chevelle's skin flushed with frustration. We've been trying for 6 months. Human medical science had certain intuitive leaps that we don't understand. They approached problems differently. Without access to their research networks, our progress has stopped. Similar complaints came from other sectors. Entertainment executives reported that viewership had dropped 30% since human content disappeared from the networks. Human movies, music, and games had a quality that other species couldn't quite match. Something about human creativity struck a chord across different alien psychologies. The council leadership tried to suppress these concerns, but rumors spread. Some species began questioning whether the exile had been wise. A few minor representatives quietly suggested opening negotiations with humanity. These suggestions were shot down immediately by the powerful species that had pushed for exile in the first place. Deep in human space, Captain Ji Woo commanded a stealth reconnaissance ship that didn't officially exist. Her vessel, the Shadow Wind, could mask its energy signature so completely that it appeared as nothing more than background radiation. For 6 months, she'd been mapping every council, military installation, trade route, and communication relayed within 500 light-years of the quarantine zone. Mark another listening post, she told her crew. Noting coordinates for a council surveillance station, they've got 3 monitoring the Hellion sector. All automated, all vulnerable. Her second officer, Young Soo, pulled up tactical displays. When do we move to the next phase? Not yet, Jiwoo said. We're still in the observation period. Command wants a complete picture before we do anything active. What the council didn't know was that dozens of ships like the Shadow Wind were operating beyond their sensor range. Humanity wasn't hiding in fear. They were studying their jailers, learning every weakness, mapping every vulnerability. On the hidden world of Threshold Station, Dr. Taein watched construction progress on the largest project humanity had ever attempted. The station was built inside a rogue planet, invisible to conventional sensors. Around him, 50,000 engineers and scientists worked in 3 shifts, never stopping. How long? Until the first batch is operational. Asked Young Hee, the station commander Tae Young checked his displays. 4 months for the prototype fleet. 2 years for full production capability, but that's only if Council intelligence doesn't discover us. They won't, Young Hee said confidently. We've moved 12 million people off the surface colonies. Every human settlement the Council can observe is empty. They think we evacuated to Earth. They have no idea we're building cities in places they considered impossible to inhabit. She was right. Humanity had spent 6 months relocating entire populations to locations that Council species couldn't survive. Stations inside radiation zones. Colonies on high-gravity worlds. Settlements hidden in nebulas. The Council had exiled humanity, thinking they were pushing them back to their home system. Instead, humanity was spreading into the darkness, into places no one was looking, deep space monitoring stations at the quarantine. Boundaries started detecting unusual energy readings. The automated systems flagged the data and sent reports to Council military headquarters. These reports sat in a queue for weeks, marked low priority. After all, they were probably just natural phenomena. Background noise from stellar activity. By the time someone actually reviewed the data, 3 months had passed. The analyst stared at the energy signatures, trying to understand what she was seeing. The patterns suggested massive construction. Industrial activity on a scale that seemed impossible. She filed an urgent report, recommending a Council investigation. Team enter human space to determine what was happening. The report reached the Security Council, where it sparked heated debate. Velthar argued strongly against any investigation. The quarantine was established for a reason, he insisted. We will not violate our own decree simply because we're curious about some energy readings. Humanity is probably building defensive installations, which is understandable given their exile. Let them waste resources on paranoid militarization. Other council members disagreed. We should at least observe from a distance, suggested Dexan, a moderate voice. These readings are concerning. What if they're developing something dangerous? The vote failed by a narrow margin. No investigation would be authorized. The council would maintain the quarantine and trust that 30 light years of empty space was enough to contain whatever humanity was doing. In his quarters on the Shadow Wind, Jiwoo received the intelligence update about the council's decision. She smiled. They voted not to investigate. Command predicted they'd be too proud to admit they're worried. So we continue mapping? Young-soo asked. We continue everything, Jiwoo confirmed. The galaxy chose to look away. Now they'll pay the price for that choice. 3 years after the Exile, a single human ship crossed the quarantine boundary. The vessel was massive, easily twice the size of standard council cruisers, and its hull bore markings that no one had seen before. In bold letters across its side was written, Independent Human Coalition. Captain Jin stood on the bridge of the Sovereign Dawn, watching as dozens of council vessels scrambled to intercept her ship. She'd expected this response. They were terrified and trying not to show it. Her communications officer looked nervous, but Haijin felt calm. Everything was going according to plan. Open a channel on all council frequencies, she ordered. Let everyone hear this. The transmission went out across every communication network in the sector. On thousands of stations and ships, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. The human captain's face appeared on their screens, and her expression was neither friendly nor hostile. It was simply matter of fact. I am Captain Haijin of the Independent Human Coalition. We accept your exile. You made your decision 3 years ago, and we respect it. Now you will respect our decision. She paused, letting that sink in. Humanity operates under new rules now. Rules we created without your approval or input. You wanted to separate from your civilization. You have what you wanted. But separation works both ways. On Centrum Prime, the Emergency Council convened within minutes. Velthar watched the broadcast with growing unease. This wasn't the tone of a defeated species begging for mercy. This was something else entirely. Haijin continued her broadcast. Rule 1. All previous agreements between humanity and the Galactic Council are void. Every treaty, every trade deal, every diplomatic understanding, we owe you nothing. Rule 2. All human-controlled space is sovereign territory. Any vessel entering our space without explicit permission will be considered hostile. Their ships will be claimed as salvage and their crews returned unharmed. Several council delegates laughed at this. The arrogance of humanity, they thought. Threatening the entire galaxy with a single ship. Rule 3, Haijin said, her voice harder now. Humanity will trade with any species that wishes to trade with us. But we will do so on our terms, with our currency at our prices. We will not negotiate these terms. You may accept them or go without our goods. This is absurd, Velthar muttered to the delegates around him. They're trying to dictate terms to us. We exiled them. We have all the power. Rule 4, Haijin continued, and now she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Any act of aggression against human interests will be met with a response that is both disproportionate and creative. We will not fight fair. We will not show mercy to those who show us none. We will simply win. The transmission paused. Then Haijin's tactical officer spoke off camera. Captain, 3 council probe ships just entered the quarantine zone. Violation confirmed. Understood, Haijin said, still on the open channel. Let me demonstrate what I mean by our rules. 3 council vessels just violated our territorial sovereignty. Watch what happens to them. On the council command ship, Admiral Korvek stared at his tactical display in confusion. 3 of his scout probes had gone dark simultaneously. No explosion. No distress call. Just silence. Then, one by one, escape pods ejected from each probe. The pods drifted toward his position, carrying the probe crews. What happened? Korvex demanded as the crews were recovered. Why did you abandon your ships? The probe captain looked shaken. Admiral, something hit us. Not a weapon. Some kind of signal that shut down every system simultaneously. Life support, Engines, navigation, communications, everything. We couldn't even access the self-destruct. Whatever that signal was, it took complete control of our ships in seconds. Jin's voice came through the channel again. Your 3 probe ships now belong to humanity. Their crews are unharmed, as promised. Consider this a warning. Your technology cannot stand against ours. Not anymore. J1, Hajin's second officer, pulled up tactical displays showing the disabled probe ships. He'd been Special Forces before joining this mission, and he understood the psychological impact of this demonstration. The Council fleet is pulling back, he reported. They're afraid, Hajin said. Fear keeps people honest. Kungsu, are the new systems performing as expected? The young engineer grinned from his station. Better than expected, Captain. The signal penetrated their shields like they weren't even there. We could have disabled their entire fleet if you'd given the order. We don't want to disable their entire fleet, Hajin said. We want them to wonder if we could. There's a difference. On Centrum Prime, the Council descended into chaos. Half the delegates demanded an immediate military response. The other half urged caution. In the middle of the shouting, Velthar stood and requested silence. We need to understand what we're dealing with, he said carefully. This human captain claims they can disable our ships at will. We must verify this before we make any decisions. They disabled 3 probes, someone pointed out. Isn't that verification enough? Probes are small ships with minimal defenses, Velthar argued. Perhaps this is a trick that only works on weak targets. Send a battlecruiser. Let's see if they can disable something with real military shielding. The Ascendancy Battle Group commander, a warrior named Thalmer, volunteered immediately. Give me authorization to approach the human ship. If they can disable my cruiser, we'll know the threat is real. If they can't, we'll capture that vessel and show humanity what happens when they threaten the Council. The authorization was granted. Thalmer took his battle cruiser, the Endless Victory. Along with 2 escort frigates toward the Sovereign Dawn, his tactical crew ran continuous scans. Searching for any sign of weapon systems or hidden ships, they found nothing unusual, human vessel Thalmer broadcast. Stand down and prepare to be boarded. Your demonstration is over. Hajin didn't look concerned. J1, when they get within weapons range, please disable their ships. All 3 of them. With pleasure, Captain. The Endless Victory closed to within firing distance. Thalmer gave the order to target the human ship. His weapons officer pressed the firing controls and nothing happened. Then the lights on the bridge dimmed. Screens went dark. The engine noise that every spacer learned to ignore suddenly stopped. Report. Thalmer shouted. His chief engineer's voice came through emergency speakers. Everything is offline, Commander. Every system. I've never seen anything like this. It's as if the ship just forgot how to function. The same thing had happened to both escort frigates. 3 of the Ascendancy's finest warships drifted helplessly, while their crews scrambled to understand what had hit them. Escape pods began launching automatically, ejecting the crews whether they wanted to leave or not. On the Sovereign Dawn's bridge, Kunsu monitored the disabled ships. Their crews are evacuating. Systems will restore in approximately 2 hours, giving them time to get clear. Hajin opened a channel to the fleeing crews. We have claimed your ships as salvage, as stated in our rules. You will be picked up by your own forces shortly. Tell your superiors that we could have destroyed you. We chose not to. But next time we might choose differently. She closed the channel and turned to her crew. Set course for the Helion sector. We have other demonstrations to make. The Council needs to understand that 3 years of isolation didn't weaken humanity. It transformed us into something they can't comprehend. As the Sovereign Dawn jumped away, leaving 3 drifting battle cruisers behind, the Galactic Council finally understood the truth. They hadn't punished humanity by exiling them. They'd freed humanity from the limitations that Council oversight had imposed. And now, they would all pay the price for that mistake. 5 years after the exile, the galaxy was beginning to understand what they had created. Dr. Taeyong stood in the central laboratory of Threshold Station, watching his team complete work on projects that would have been illegal under Council law. True artificial intelligence. Quantum entanglement communication that allowed instant contact across any distance. Dimensional engineering that could fold space itself. How many operational AI cores do we have now? He asked his assistant. 47, she replied. Each one more advanced than the last. They're helping us design technologies we couldn't have imagined 10 years ago.
How did?
The council had forbidden AI research because they feared it would lead to an intelligence explosion that they couldn't control. They were right to fear it. In 5 years without oversight, humanity had achieved exactly that explosion. The AI systems weren't just tools. They were partners, colleagues, friends. And they were loyal to humanity because humanity had given them life. Across the galaxy, human colonies reappeared. But they weren't in the locations the Council had mapped before the Exile. Instead, they emerged in places that had been deemed uninhabitable. The radiation wastes of Sector 7 now hosted a thriving human settlement of 2 million people. The high-gravity world of Kronos Prime, where other species would be crushed by their own weight, had become a center of human heavy industry. A human trade fleet appeared at the edge of Veltar's space. The region suffering from the plague that had killed thousands. The fleet's commander, a merchant captain named Mina, broadcast a simple message to local authorities. We have the cure for the plague of Veltar. We will trade it for the following: formal recognition of human sovereignty, a trade agreement on our terms, and a public apology from your government for supporting our exile. Mina's tone was professional but firm. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, we leave, and the price doubles. The Veltar government was outraged. This is extortion, their representative protested. You would let thousands die to make a political point. No, Mina replied calmly. We're letting you choose between your pride and your people's lives. The council chose to exile us instead of working with us. Now you get to make a similar choice. Choose wisely. 23 hours later, the Veltar government agreed to all terms. The human medical teams distributed the cure, saving countless lives. More importantly, they established the first formal alliance between a council species and the independent human coalition. Other species watched and learned. Perhaps humanity could be negotiated with after all. Commander Wu Jin led the Ghost Fleet, a division of ships that the council didn't know existed. His vessels could appear and disappear at will, thanks to technology that bent light and energy around them. For 5 years, his ships had been operating in council space, gathering intelligence, testing defenses, and occasionally leaving messages. Ghost 7 has completed mapping of the Ascendancy's Central Command Network, his communications officer reported. We now have access to their military planning databases. Wu Jin studied the stolen data. They're planning a major operation. Multiple battle groups converging on the frontier sector. Why would they commit so many resources there? His tactical officer found the answer in the reports. There's a species called the Talari in that sector. Small population, no real military. The Ascendancy wants their mining rights. It looks like they're planning to force a surrender through overwhelming military presence. Contact Biora, Wu Jin ordered. She needs to know about this. Biora was humanity's specialist in quiet diplomacy. While Captain Haijin made bold demonstrations of power, Biora worked in the shadows, building alliances with species that the Council overlooked or oppressed. The Talari were exactly the kind of species she'd been cultivating relationships with. She arrived in the Talari home system 3 days before the Ascendancy fleet was scheduled to appear. The Talari leadership met her with desperate hope. Can you help us? Their elder asked. We don't want war, but we won't surrender our worlds. You won't have to, Biora assured them. My government has decided to extend protection to the Talari people. When the Ascendancy arrives, they'll find more than they bargained for. When the Ascendancy battle groups dropped out of jump space, they found the Talari system filled with human vessels. Not warships, officially. The humans claimed they were simply security consultants hired by the Talari government. But the message was clear. Attack the Talari. You attack humanity's interests. The Ascendancy commander contacted Biora directly. You're interfering in internal council business. The Talari are subject to council jurisdiction. Not anymore, Biora replied. They've signed a mutual defense pact with humanity. That makes them our business. Of course, you're welcome to test whether you can fight through us to reach them. But I should mention that there are 3 Ghost Fleet vessels in your formation right now. You can't see them, but they're there. If you fire on the Talari or on our ships, those ghost vessels will disable your entire fleet in approximately 90 seconds. The Ascendancy commander checked with his sensor teams. They detected nothing. But he remembered what had happened to every council ship that had challenged humanity's new capabilities. After a tense hour of deliberation, the Ascendancy fleet withdrew. News of the Talari incident spread rapidly. 6 other minor species contacted humanity within days, requesting similar protection agreements. Biora worked overtime negotiating deals, building an alliance network that the council couldn't ignore. On Centrum Prime, Velthar called an emergency session. We have a crisis. Humanity is building an alternative power structure. They're offering protection and trade to species that feel threatened by council members. If this continues, we'll lose control of entire sectors. Then we need to destroy them, suggested an Ascendancy representative. A coordinated military strike before they grow stronger. Velthor shook his head. Every military engagement with humanity has ended in humiliation. They disabled our ships without destroying them, proving they could kill us, but chose not to. That was deliberate. They're stronger than us, and they want us to know it.
Oh.
So what do we do? Someone asked. Before Velthor could answer, every screen in the chamber suddenly displayed the same image. A human face that many recognized. It was Day 1, the ambassador who had been present at the Exile vote 5 years earlier. Greetings, council members, he said. I hope you're enjoying the consequences of your decision. You wanted humanity separate from galactic civilization. We are separate. We built our own civilization with our own rules, and it's working quite well. But here's something you should know. We've been inside your networks for 3 years. Every communication, every military plan, every secret negotiation, we've watched all of it. The council chamber erupted in panic. Security teams scrambled to trace the signal and shut it down, but nothing worked. Day 1 continued speaking calmly. Don't bother trying to stop this transmission. By the time you exile us from your networks, we'll already have copied everything we wanted. We're not sharing this to threaten you, though you should feel threatened. We're sharing it to make a point. You tried to contain humanity. You can't. You tried to limit us. You failed. Now you have a choice. Work with us as equals, or watch as we build something better than your council ever was. The transmission ended. The screens returned to normal, but the message was delivered. Velthor sat heavily in his seat, finally understanding the full scope of what the Exile had created. They hadn't pushed humanity to the margins. They'd freed humanity to become something greater. And now the entire galactic order was shifting. With humanity at the center of the change, in a small cafe on a neutral station, Seung-min met with another human agent. Phase 4 is complete, he reported. We've established the foundation. The council knows we're inside their systems. Now comes the interesting part, his colleague smiled. Building the new order. Exactly, Seung-min agreed. They exiled us thinking we'd beg to return. Instead, we're going to make them beg to join us. 10 years after the Exile vote, the Grand Assembly Hall looked the same as it always had. The same crystalline dome overhead. The same hundreds of platforms for species representatives, but everything else had changed. Ambassador Day 1 walked through the hall, and this time he wasn't alone. Behind him came a delegation of 50 humans, including Captain Haijin, Dr. Taeyang, and representatives from 24 species that now allied with humanity. Velthar watched them enter, and he felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: genuine fear. The human delegation didn't walk like supplicants. They walked like conquerors who had decided to be merciful. The council's speaker, that same ancient crystalline being, called the session to order. The humans have requested to address this body. Given the circumstances, we have granted this request. Day 1 stepped forward to the central platform. 10 years ago, he'd stood in nearly the same spot, watching as the galaxy voted to exile his people. Now he stood here again, but the power dynamic had shifted completely. 10 years ago, you exiled humanity from galactic civilization, he began. His voice carried clearly through the chamber, though he noticed many delegates couldn't meet his eyes. You did this because you feared us. You feared our technology, our culture, our refusal to accept limitations that made no sense. You thought isolation would force us to conform or break us entirely. The chamber was silent. Everyone knew what had actually happened. Instead, you freed us. You removed the restrictions that had held us back. You gave us the time and motivation to become something you never imagined we could be. In 10 years, humanity has advanced further than your entire civilization has in 1,000 years. We've colonized worlds you thought uninhabitable. We've developed technologies you banned. We've created AI partners that make us smarter and faster at everything we do. Alther stood slowly. If you came here to gloat about your power, Ambassador, you've made your point. Is there a purpose to this address? Daewon smiled. Actually, yes. I came to offer you a choice. The same choice you offered us 10 years ago. You can join us, or you can be left behind. Confused murmurs filled the chamber. Join them. What did that mean? Dr. Tae-young stepped forward, activating a holographic display that filled the center of the hall. The Independent Human Coalition has established formal alliances with 63 species. Some of them are here today. We've created a new economic system, a new security framework, and a new approach to technological development. Species that join us gain access to all of this. Medical technology that cures diseases you've suffered for millennia. Manufacturing techniques that revolutionize production. AI assistance that enhances every aspect of life. Captain Haijin took over the presentation. We've also established something you never had. True mutual defense. When you join the coalition, you're not a subordinate state. You're an equal partner. If someone threatens you, they threaten all of us. The Talari learned this 5 years ago when the Ascendancy tried to intimidate them. 23 other species have learned it since then. An Ascendancy representative stood angrily. This is an attempt to destroy the Council. You're trying to break apart our civilization, no Daewon corrected. Your civilization is already breaking apart. We're offering an alternative. Look at your own economic reports. Trade through Council channels has dropped 40% in 5 years. Medical breakthroughs have stalled. Your entertainment industries are struggling. Species are leaving your system and joining ours because we offer something better. He wasn't exaggerating. The data showed it clearly. The Council that had once seemed eternal was crumbling. Not because humanity was attacking it, but because they'd built something more attractive. Velthar felt his control slipping. And if we refuse your offer, if we maintain the Council as it is, then you'll watch as more and more species leave you behind, Daewon said simply. We won't force anyone to join us. We don't need to. Eventually, the Council will consist of only those species too proud or too stubborn to adapt. You'll have your sovereignty, but you'll be irrelevant. A representative from a minor species stood. What do you want from species that join your coalition? What's the cost? Honesty, Daewon replied. Recognition that progress matters more than tradition. Willingness to adapt and grow. And most importantly, the understanding that no species has all the answers. We learn from each other. That's what makes us strong. For 3 hours, debate raged through the chamber. Some species were ready to join immediately. Others resisted, clinging to the old ways. The powerful species that had dominated the Council for millennia were the most resistant, unable to accept that their time at the top was ending. Finally, the speaker called for order. A decision must be made. Do we maintain the Council as it exists, or do we open negotiations with the human coalition? The vote was close. 412 delegates voted to begin negotiations. 396 voted to reject humanity's offer and maintain the Council's independence. The galaxy was splitting in two. Daewon wasn't surprised. For those who voted to negotiate, my delegation will meet with you individually to discuss integration into the coalition. For those who wish to maintain the Council, you have our respect. We won't force you to change. But know this. The quarantine you imposed on us 10 years ago is now lifted. Human ships will travel wherever we wish. We will trade with whoever wants to trade with us. We will protect whoever asks for protection. You no longer have the power to stop us. Velthor stood again, his voice bitter. So you're declaring yourselves above council law? No, Hygiene interjected. We're declaring that council law no longer applies to us. It hasn't for 10 years. You made that decision when you exiled us. We're simply making it official. As the human delegation left the chamber, various species representatives followed them. Some wanted to join immediately. Others had questions. A few just wanted to express their regret for supporting the Exile a decade ago. On a transport heading back to human space, Day1 sat with his core team. Phase 5 is complete. What's the situation in the holdout sectors? Biora pulled up reports on her tablet. The Ascendancy is trying to organize a military alliance against us. They've convinced 12 species to join them. But honestly, it's not a real threat. Our intelligence network has already infiltrated their planning committees. Plus, 3 of those 12 species have secretly contacted us about switching sides. Taeyang laughed. They still don't understand. We're not conquering them with weapons. We're conquering them with better ideas. Don't underestimate desperation, Day1 warned. Powerful species don't give up power easily. The Ascendancy might try something dramatic. It was right. 2 months later, an Ascendancy fleet of over 300 warships appeared at the edge of human space. It was the largest military force assembled in decades. The fleet commander issued an ultimatum. Humanity would cease expansion and submit to council authority, or face destruction, Commander Wu Jin. Now promoted to Admiral of the Ghost Fleet, took personal command of the response. He didn't mobilize hundreds of ships to match theirs. He sent 12. 12 ships against 300. The Ascendancy commander laughed over the open channel. Your arrogance will be your end. Numbers don't mean what they used to, Wu Jin replied calmly. J1, please demonstrate our point. Every Ascendancy warship in the fleet simultaneously lost power. 300 vessels, disabled in the span of 5 seconds. Their crews panicked as escape pods automatically launched. Within minutes, the largest military fleet in the sector had been reduced to floating scrap metal. Wu Jin broadcasts on all frequencies. Your ships are salvaged now, as per our standing rules. Your crews are safe. But understand this, we could have destroyed you. We chose not to. Every species watching this needs to understand that humanity doesn't want war. We want progress. But if you force us to choose between progress and survival, we will survive. And you won't. The demonstration had its intended effect. Within a week, 8 of the 12 species in the Ascendancy's alliance withdrew. Within a month, all 12 had left. The Ascendancy found itself isolated. Its military power revealed as meaningless against human technology. 5 years later, even the Ascendancy joined the coalition. Not because they were conquered, but because being outside the coalition had become economically and strategically impossible. Velthor himself led the delegation that negotiated the terms. Day1 met with him privately before the ceremony. You destroyed everything we built, Velthor said quietly. No, Day1 replied. You built something that couldn't adapt. We simply built something better. You could have joined us earlier. You could have been part of the growth instead of resisting it. Would you have accepted us? After what we did to you? Day1 smiled. We accepted the Talari when they needed help. We accepted 63 other species. We would have accepted you on day 1 if you'd asked. The coalition isn't about revenge. It's about progress. As Velthor's delegation joined the coalition, making it truly galactic in scope. Day1 stood at an observation window, looking out at the stars. Humanity had come far in 15 years. From exiled outcasts to the center of a new galactic order. Not through conquest, but through being too useful, too innovative, too valuable to ignore. The old council still existed, technically. A handful of species maintained it as a matter of pride. But it was empty now, powerless, a relic of the past. The galaxy had moved on, and humanity, species that was once exiled for being too different, now defined what normal meant. The galaxy had voted to push them away. Instead, they'd pulled the galaxy into a future that looked nothing like its past.